My name is Eric. I'm 37. A former soldier, now working in private security. I've been married to Julia for 10 years. She's a school psychologist. A woman who sees through people like glass. A woman who once made my world simple. Clear. And in our life, there was always Thomas. Officially, my stepbrother. We met in our teens after my father remarried. He became part of the family, though we shared no blood. Thomas would visit on holidays, help with repairs, crash on our couch. He was lively, charming, just messy enough to be human. The opposite of me. And, always a little too attentive to Julia. But I trusted him. At least, I used to. I found the letter by accident. In an old storage box Julia asked me to move to the garage. Just junk, photos, wires, forgotten papers. And among them, one envelope. On it, in handwriting I instantly recognized, was written. For Thomas. If you find this, burn it. I wasn't supposed to open it. But I did. The letter wasn't from me. And it wasn't for me. But everything inside hit me harder than anything I'd faced in uniform. I know you're not really his brother. And I know we both feel it. Just don't tell him. He wouldn't survive it. When I touch you, it's not betrayal. It's coming home. My hands trembled. My pulse pounded like I was back in combat. Every word was a cut. It was my wife's handwriting. I sat on the cold concrete garage floor, staring at that paper, feeling everything I thought I knew, about her, about brotherhood, about our marriage, crumbling. Thomas. My wife. And something between them that had existed far longer than I ever realized. Something they had buried. Together. I didn't tell Julia I'd found the letter. I told her I had a night shift, and walked out the door. Then I called Thomas. We need to talk. Just you and me. He was silent for a few seconds. Then said softly. So, you found it. We met near the trailhead off Route 9, the same one we used to hike back in our 20s, before the military, before marriage, before betrayal started to wear a familiar face. Neutral ground. Empty air. Nothing left to say, and somehow still too much. Thomas was already waiting, leaning against his truck like he belonged there. But for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uneasy, coiled tight, as if something inside him was about to snap. There was no trace of that easy charm he always wore like armor. Just tension in his jaw and shadows in his eyes. I didn't plan what to say. The letter in my pocket pulsed like a second heartbeat. I had read it too many times to count, trying to convince myself it couldn't mean what it clearly meant. That my wife, my Julia, the woman I had built my life around, had written those words, to him. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Soft, familiar, intimate. The way you write when your body already knows the person reading it. The kind of emotional nakedness that isn't accidental, it's chosen. I confronted him with it. He didn't deny the letter. Didn't try to run. He just looked at the ground and said it was time I knew the truth. As if he had rehearsed this moment in his head for years. As if part of him was relieved to finally bleed it out. Thomas explained that we weren't brothers. Not really. His mother had dated my father briefly, and for convenience, the adults had let the illusion stick. A harmless lie, until it wasn't. I remembered thinking it made sense. We'd never shared a childhood, just a series of holidays and weekends, patched together with casual affection and forced familiarity. He claimed it hadn't started until I was deployed. That she felt alone. That he visited to check on her. That nothing happened at first. Just conversations. Late-night phone calls. Shared silences. The kind of intimacy that wraps around you when grief or longing or fear makes everything feel bigger than it is. Or maybe exactly what it is. According to him, they never slept together while I was away. But emotional cheating doesn't need a bed. It needs a door left open, and I had left one wide. I tried to picture the version of her he described, anxious, isolated, waiting for letters that never came. I had been in blackout zones for months. It was true I hadn't written much. I believed no news meant safety. She must have thought it meant absence. And Thomas was always present. When I returned, she smiled the same, touched me the same, loved me with the same rhythm. I saw nothing. Felt nothing off. But somewhere behind those familiar eyes, a different reality had already bloomed. He told me she'd ended it. That she wrote the letter as a goodbye. That she'd chosen me. But even in his voice, I heard the bitterness of someone who had been second place for far too long, and never quite believed he deserved it. I didn't respond to most of what he said. My body was numb. My mind, louder than his voice, replaying every small moment I'd once dismissed, the time she lingered when he hugged her, the way her laugh changed when he was in the room, the wine they drank on the back porch long after I'd gone to bed. And then, one final strike, he mentioned a journal. Apparently, Julia had written everything. Every thought. Every moment she didn't say out loud. Her confessions, her contradictions, maybe even her guilt. It wasn't just a letter. It was a record. A mirror I hadn't looked into yet. He didn't tell me where it was. He didn't need to. I knew exactly where she'd hide something she wanted close, but buried. And that knowledge chilled me more than anything he could have said. I found the journal exactly where I knew it would be, beneath the false bottom of the nightstand drawer, hidden under old receipts and a bundle of dried lavender she once said reminded her of our honeymoon. The leather was worn, the corners softened from use. I hesitated before opening it. Something in me wanted to preserve the lie just a little longer, to stay in the moment before knowing becomes irreversible. But I opened it anyway. The handwriting was hers. Loopy, slanted, feminine. Familiar. The first few pages were nothing, mundane reflections about the school, stress at work, a new student with night terrors. Then her words began to shift. The tone grew hushed, introspective, like whispering to herself across time. Then I reached the date that matched my deployment. I didn't expect to feel anything when he showed up at the door. It's just Tom, I thought. It's always just Tom. But then he looked at me like I was something rare. Like I'd become something in his absence. And I felt my body remember I'm not invisible. I kept reading. Her entries spilled like confessions she hadn't dared say aloud. At first, she wrote about how lost she felt, how the silence from me gnawed at her until her mind filled in answers. Terrible answers. About death. About abandonment. And then, slowly, she started writing about him. He didn't touch me at first. He just sat on the couch and let me cry. Not a dramatic sob, just that quiet, hollow kind that leaks out when no one's looking. He brought coffee. Told me my eyes looked tired. And I hated how seen I felt. Not because it was wrong. But because I wanted him to see me. It hurt, reading how easily she let him close. But what came next was worse. I stood by the window while he spoke about nothing, work, the news, the dog he wanted to adopt. I felt his voice fill the room like warmth, and I just turned. I don't even remember deciding. He was standing so close. I reached for his hand and he didn't pull away. He looked surprised, almost guilty. But not enough. I brought his fingers to my collarbone. I told myself it wasn't cheating. Just touch. Just needing someone. But his hand lingered. Not like yours, firm, assured, anchored. His touch asked permission even as it trembled. I stopped reading, breath held like a drowning man. This wasn't lust. It was worse. It was emotional surrender, painted in small moments. Shared silences. Slow-motion decisions that felt gentle at first but cut deeper than any knife. She hadn't described a wild encounter. She described being chosen. And then the entry that broke me. I wore his flannel the next morning. It smelled like cedar and smoke. Not like home, but like escape. I caught myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the smile. Not smug. Not sinful. Just, relieved. He stood behind me, arms around my waist. I leaned back without thinking. I let his hand settle just below my ribs, and I thought, this is what it feels like to be someone's beginning, not someone's stability. My hands trembled. I turned the page but couldn't keep reading. The image haunted me, her, standing in the mirror in another man's shirt, bathed in morning light, smiling like she'd finally found herself in someone else's arms. And him, behind her, holding the version of my wife I hadn't seen in years, soft, present, alive. I closed the journal. Not because I was done. Because I couldn't take one more line without losing whatever was left of the man I used to be. I didn't eat that day. Didn't shower. Didn't speak. The journal sat like a loaded weapon on the counter, its presence humming beneath my skin. I couldn't bring myself to read more, not yet. Every page felt like peeling back flesh. And I'd already bled enough for 2 lifetimes. Instead, I moved through the house like a stranger in someone else's life. I noticed things I'd never paid attention to before, how often her scent clung to the throw pillows, how her makeup brushes were always left slightly damp in the bathroom. How the wine glasses were always washed, but mine always felt colder. Unused. Decorative. She had curated our life so well that I almost didn't notice how long I'd been absent from it. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for what felt like hours. I didn't recognize the man staring back. There were lines I hadn't noticed before. A hollow beneath my eyes. A tension in my jaw I couldn't unclench. My reflection looked tired, older, like a man who had lost something without realizing it until it was already rotting in his hands. But the worst part wasn't the emptiness. It was the clarity. Because as I stood there, staring at myself, I realized, this version of me is exactly what she'd written about. Predictable. Distant. Safe. Not wanted. Not seen. I don't know when I sat down on the floor. I only remember the coldness of the tile, the sound of the ticking clock, and the dull, rhythmic throb behind my eyes. At some point I started laughing. Not because anything was funny. But because I'd spent years giving her everything I thought a man should give, stability, loyalty, routine. I was her anchor. Her constant. And somewhere along the line, she stopped needing an anchor. She needed a storm. And she found it in him. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table, lit a candle, and laid out the journal again. I didn't read it this time. I just stared at it. Like it was alive. Like it might speak if I was quiet long enough. Instead, my own thoughts whispered. What now? Burn it? Pretend it never happened? Confront her? Scream until my lungs collapsed? None of those options felt real. They felt theatrical. Like what a character in a story might do. Not what I'd do. No, what I wanted was simpler. Cleaner. I wanted her to feel exposed. Not hurt. Not threatened. Just, seen. The way she described him seeing her. And the way she never saw me again. The next morning, I woke up with a plan, not fully formed, but alive. Breathing. It started as a seed and grew by the minute. I opened a blank document on my laptop. And I began typing. The Journal of Julia Whitmore. Word for word, I copied her entries. I kept her voice. Her rawness. Her imagery. I stripped out names. Changed identifying details. But the essence? I kept it intact. Page after page. Her loneliness. Her desire. Her betrayal. Every word she never expected to be read, I polished into clarity. And when I finished, I created an anonymous Medium blog. I posted one entry. No name. No photos. Just her words. Then I closed the laptop and sat in silence. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a test. Would she see it? Would he? I gave the post a quiet, poetic title. The morning after I wore his shirt. Then I went back to the mirror. This time, I didn't see the man she forgot. I saw someone new. It took less than 24 hours. I checked the blog late the next night, expecting nothing. Maybe a few accidental clicks. Instead, the post had already been shared 72 times. Someone had left a comment. This wrecked me. Whoever wrote this. I see you. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the message I received the next morning. From Julia. We need to talk. No greeting. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I didn't respond. I waited. That evening, she came home earlier than usual. No humming. No keys jingling. Just the sharp, precise sound of her heels on the tile and the thick silence of someone carrying a truth they hoped no one else had seen. She walked into the kitchen and stopped when she saw me. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. She knew. I could see it in the way her breath caught, how her hands flexed at her sides like she was trying to squeeze her own pulse back into rhythm. You published it, she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was small. Like she'd run out of defenses. I leaned against the counter. Calm. Cold. You left it for someone to find, I said. Someone did. Her face flushed. Not from shame, from fear. You don't know who's reading that. I do, I said. You are. The silence between us stretched thin, like a wire pulled taut. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she whispered. I was just seen. I interrupted. Wanted. Chosen. She looked away. Because she knew I had read everything. And maybe, for the first time, she realized what it felt like to be exposed. I loved you, she said. Past tense. So that's how she wanted to play it. I didn't flinch. You wrote your truth. I just gave it light. You humiliated me. I stepped closer, close enough for her to smell the smoke of her own confession still clinging to my skin. No, I said. You did that. I just stopped cleaning up the ashes. She didn't cry. I don't think she had tears left. She stood there, hollow-eyed and wordless, in the home we'd built together. A home that now felt like a stage after the show was over, empty, cold, echoing. I signed the papers, she said finally. I'll leave by Friday. I nodded. She moved past me slowly, shoulders pulled in like someone retreating from fire. And for a moment, I felt the shadow of something, pity, maybe. But it passed. She was never burned. She lit the match. She left on a Friday. No drama. No last attempt to fix it. Just a half-packed suitcase, a folded set of keys, and silence. She didn't look at me as she walked to the car. She didn't need to. The goodbye had already happened weeks before, we just hadn't said it aloud. I watched from the window as her car disappeared down the street. A part of me thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt nothing. And maybe that was worse. Grief is at least alive. Numbness is a mausoleum. For the next few days, I moved like a man newly skinned, raw and exposed. The house was too quiet, the walls too still. I kept the windows open just to hear something breathe. I stopped checking the blog. I didn't need to. It had done its job. She was gone. But closure? No. Closure never really comes in a clean line. It comes in fragments, quiet, slow, sideways. I started boxing her things. Some I donated. Others I trashed. I found little remnants tucked into strange places, a bobby pin beneath the couch, a faded receipt from that Italian place we used to go to, a necklace tangled in the dryer vent. But what stopped me cold was the photo. Taped to the underside of her desk drawer. It wasn't old. It was recent. Taken with a Polaroid. The date in pen on the bottom. Just 3 weeks ago. She stood in the frame. Alone. Barefoot, wearing my flannel. Her hair loose. Her eyes, soft, tired, familiar. And the room behind her. Not ours. It was his. That cabin by the lake. I hadn't even known she'd been there. I thought I was the only one who ever wanted to go. On the back of the photo, she had written in tiny, shaking script. I didn't know how to stop loving both of you. My hands went cold. Not because of the words. But because of the second photo beneath it. Same cabin. Same flannel. But this time, it wasn't just her in the frame. He was there, too. Thomas. Sitting behind her on the bed. Blurred, but unmistakable. His arm was around her waist. His eyes on the camera. And in her face, something I hadn't seen in years. Peace. Not passion. Not guilt. Peace. It hit me then, she hadn't chosen one of us. She tried to choose neither. She was never torn between two men. She was running from both versions of herself. The loyal wife. The reckless lover. And in the end, she'd failed to be either. I sat down on the floor, the photo trembling in my hand. My world had already collapsed once. But this was something different. Not betrayal. Not even grief. Just an echo. A ghost of a woman who no longer existed, in my life or his. She'd vanished before either of us realized it. I didn't burn the photos. I thought I might. Thought I'd throw them in the fire, watch the edges curl and blacken, let the flames eat the proof that she ever belonged to anyone but herself. But I didn't. I placed them in a small envelope and tucked it inside the journal. Then I closed it, wrapped it in twine, and slid it into the back of my closet, behind an old army duffel I haven't opened in years. Not because I wanted to keep it. But because I didn't need to destroy it to be free. Some memories rot. Others dry out. And some just wait quietly until they no longer matter. I spent the next week reclaiming the house. Not renovating, reclaiming. I tore down the dried-out vines she used to hang on the back porch. Painted the living room something warmer. Put the TV in a different corner. Rearranged the shelves. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reminding myself I was still here. She had hollowed out rooms I didn't even know were part of me. And now, slowly, I was filling them back up. One morning, I got a text from Thomas. I heard she left. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a sentence loaded with everything he wasn't willing to say. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. We were done. Whatever we had called family, it had died a long time ago. Maybe it was never real to begin with. Just a structure built from circumstance, not blood or bond. And I'd let it stand too long out of habit. But not anymore. That Sunday, I returned to the lake. Not to the cabin. I didn't need to chase ghosts. I stood by the shoreline, boots in the mud, wind in my face, and watched the water move like it had all the time in the world. Smooth. Relentless. Cleansing. I closed my eyes and said her name once. Not like a wish. Not like a prayer. Like a goodbye. That was the last time. Since then, life has been quiet. Honest. Mine. I moved across town into a smaller place, less to clean, less to remember. I built my own bookshelf. I started running again. I even picked up therapy, just to hear myself out loud. It helped more than I expected. Some nights, I still wake up thinking I hear her in the hallway. The creak of the old floorboards. The scent of lavender. But it's only memory. And memories lose their power when you stop kneeling to them. People ask if I'm okay now. I always tell them the truth. Not the easy version. Not, I'm fine. But this. I was broken. Then I bled. Then I rebuilt. That's the arc. Not heroic. Not tragic. Just human. And sometimes, when I pass a mirror now, I pause. Not to check my reflection. But to remind myself, I survived a woman who didn't mean to destroy me, but did anyway. And I didn't burn for her. I walked through the fire. And came out clean.